Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Listening skills in communication. Hello students, I am Dr. Rinki Menon, Assistant Professor presently working at Sri Narayana College of Commerce, Gujarat University. Today, I would be delivering a lecture in the subject of business communication. The course objective. The course aims to make students understand the basic concepts of business communication and develop conceptual clarity and logical skills so that they can use them. The course content. The course comprises of various concepts of communication. I would start with the fourth unit that deals with one of the important elements of communication, that is listening. Now let us begin with today's module that we shall cover. After today's lecture, you shall be able to A. Take an insight into what is listening and hearing. B. Understand the various types of listening skills and the purpose of listening. C. Next, we shall discuss the different types of listeners. D. Further, we shall take an insight of the various principles of effective listening. E. Last, we shall understand the barriers of effective listening. So, let's get started with the basics. According to Oxford Living Dictionaries, to listen means simply give attention to sound or action. In fact, effective listening is the process of analyzing sounds in a language, organizing them in recognizable patterns, interpreting the patterns and understanding the message by inferring the meaning. Listening is the receiving part of communication, and listening is all about receiving information through both our ears and eyes. It is an active, integrated communication skill that demands energy and knowledge. It is purposeful, powerful and productive. It is a technique used for understanding what is being said by taking into account how something is said and the non-verbal signs and body language that accompanies it. This technique requires a lot of practice and patience, as listening is not easy. Good listening skill is the foundation of effective human relations. It is of paramount importance to both the managers and the workers. It is to be inculcated by both of them. Communication is not complete without effective listening. Good listeners can be good negotiators and thus can face or handle crisis or critical situations easily. It comes first in human life. Unfortunately, still it is rarely taught in the classroom. So, what is listening? Is listening and hearing the same? Listening is not to be confused with hearing. Hearing is a physiological process which involves receiving the sound waves by the eardrum and transferring them to the brain. It is an involuntary act that happens automatically. Hearing refers to the sound that enters your ears. It is a physical process that happens automatically. Listening, however, requires more than that. It requires focus, concentrated efforts and both mental and sometimes physical as well. Listening is more than hearing. It involves the process of interpretation and inference. It is a voluntary activity and hence it is deliberate, forceful. Hence, listening means paying attention not only to the story but how it is told, the use of language and voice, and how the other person uses his or her body. In other words, it means being aware of both verbal and non-verbal messages. Your ability to listen effectively depends on the degree to which you perceive and understand the messages. Research shows that effective communication involves 50% more listening than speaking. So, it is more important to realize that listening is not just paying attention to other person's words, but also his tone, facial expressions, body language. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. As a result, communication breaks down and the sender of the message can easily become frustrated or irritated. In fact, the skill of listening is intimately related to the skill of speaking. Both are natural keys to the communication. To be an excellent communicator, one needs to develop both the skills. Your competence in listening is directly proportional to that of speaking. In fact, both the skills complement and supplement each other, and their relationship is symbiotic, resulting in a fine communication. Here, fully, F-U-L-L-Y, means physically, mentally, emotionally and psychologically present or alive. A person may be mentally present but then emotionally disturbed by something else. A student may be physically present in the classroom but mentally absent. Probably the student has to go home for vacation and daydreams of the celebration that will take place at home. Similarly, when the teacher announces that she is going to ask questions to the students by random selection, physiologically a weak student will feel intimidated. Listening and hearing. Listening is the ability to accurately receive and interpret message in a communication process. Listening is the key to effective communication. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. As a result, communication breakdowns, the sender of the message can be easily become frustrated or irritated. Hearing refers to the sound that enters your ears. It is a physical process, provided you do not have any hearing problems and it happens automatically. Listening, however, requires more than that. It requires focus and concentrated efforts, both mental and sometimes physical as well. Listening means paying attention not only to the story but how it is told, use of language, voice tone and how the other person uses the body language. In the other words, it means being aware of both verbal and non-verbal messages. Your ability to listen effectively depends on the degree to which you perceive and understand the message. Listening is not passive process. In fact, the listener can and should be at least as engaged in the process as the speaker. The phrase active listening is used to describe this process of being fully involved. Listening is different from hearing because hearing basically is a physical activity. You hear blaring horns and get exposed to noise pollution when you are in a traffic jam. However, listening is a mental activity that involves and uses the brain. So, why is listening important? That takes us to the purpose of listening. Undoubtedly, effective listening is extremely important as it serves a number of possible purposes depending on the situation and the nature of the communication. Like precisely, it helps 1. To specifically focus on the messages being communicated, avoiding distractions and preconceptions. Second, it helps to gain a full and accurate understanding into speaker's point of view and ideas. Third, listening helps to critically access what is being said. Fourth, listening helps to observe the non-verbal signals accompanying what is being said to enhance the understanding. Fifth, listening suffices the purpose of interest, concern and concentration. Sixth, proper listening encourages the speaker to communicate fully, openly and honestly. Seventh, to develop a selflessness approach putting the speaker first. Eighth, to arrive at a shared and agreed understanding and acceptance of both the sides of views. Often, our main concern while listening is to formulate ways to respond. This is not the function of listening. We should try to focus fully on what is being said and how it is being said in order to understand the speaker. This takes us to the types of listening skills. Types of listening skills. Discriminative listening. Discriminative listening is the most basic type of listening, whereby the difference between sounds is identified. If you cannot hear differences, then you cannot make sense of meaning that is expressed by such differences. We learn to discriminate between sounds within our own language early and later are unable to discriminate between the phonemes of other language. This is one reason why a person from one country finds it difficult to speak in another language perfectly, as they are unable to distinguish the subtle sounds that are required in that language. Likewise, a person who cannot hear the subtitles of emotional variations in another person's voice will be less likely to be able to discern the emotions the other person is experiencing. Listening is a visual as well as auditory act, as we communicate much through our body language. We, hence, also need to be able to discriminate between muscle and skeletal movements that signify different meanings. Comprehension listening. The next step beyond discriminating between different sounds and sights is to make sense of them. To comprehend the meaning requires first having a lexion or knowledge of words at our fingertips, and also all rules of grammar and syntax by which we can understand what others are saying. The same is true, of course, for the visual components of communication, and an understanding of body language helps us to understand what the other person is really meaning. In communication, some words are more important and some less. So, and comprehension often benefits from extraction of key facts and items from a long speech. Comprehension listening is also known as content listening, informative listening, and full listening. Critical listening. Critical listening is listening in order to evaluate and judge, forming an opinion about what is being said. Judgment includes assessing strengths and weaknesses, agreements and approvals. This form of listening requires significant real-time cognitive effort as the listener analyzes what is being said, relating it to the existing knowledge and rules while simultaneously listening to the ongoing words from the speaker. Bias listening. Bias listening happens when the person hears only what they want to hear, typically misinterpreting what the other person says based on the stereotypes and other biases that they have. Such bias listening is often evaluative in nature. Evaluative listening. In evaluative listening or critical listening, we make judgments about what the other person is saying. We seek to access the truth of what is being said. We also judge what they said against our values, assessing them as good or bad, worthy or unworthy. Evaluative listening is particular, pertinent or existent when the other person is trying to persuade us, perhaps to change our behavior or maybe even to change our beliefs. Within this, we also discriminate between the subtitles of language and comprehend the inner meaning of what is said. Typically, we also weigh upon the pros, that is advantages, and disadvantages, cons of an argument, determining whether it makes sense logically as well as whether it is helpful to us. Evaluative listening is also called critical, judgmental or interpretative listening. Appreciative listening. In appreciative listening, we seek certain information which will appreciate, for example, that which helps meet our needs and goals. We use appreciative listening when we are listening to good music, poetry, or maybe even the stirring words of a great leader. Sympathetic listening. In sympathetic listening, we care about the other person and show this concern in the way we pay close attention and express our sorrow for their ills and happiness at their joys. Empathetic listening. When we listen empathetically, we go beyond sympathy to seek a truer understanding on what or how others are feeling. This requires excellent discrimination and close attention to the small nuances of emotional signals. When we are being truly empathetic, we actually feel what they are feeling. Therapeutic listening. In therapeutic listening, the listener has a purpose of not only empathizing with the speaker but also to use this deep connection in order to help the speaker understand, change, or develop in some way. This not only happens when you go to see a therapist but also in many social situations where friends and family seek to both diagnose the problem from listening and also to help the speaker cure themselves, perhaps by some cathartic process. This also happens in work situations where managers, trainers and coaches seek to help employees learn and develop. Dialogic listening. The word dialogue stems from the Greek word dia, means through, and logos means words. Thus, dialogic listening means learning through conversations and an engaged interchange of ideas and information in which we actively seek to learn more about the person and how they think. Dialogic listening is sometimes known as relational listening. Next, relationship listening. Sometimes the most important factor in listening is in order to develop or sustain a relationship. This is why lovers talk for hours and attend closely to what each other has to say when the same words from someone else would seem to be rather boring. Relationship listening is also important in areas such as negotiation and sales, where it is helpful if the other person likes you and trusts you. Selective listening. This is more negative type of listening. It implies that the listener is somehow biased or partial to what they are hearing. Bias or partiality can be based on preconceived ideas or emotionally difficult communications. Selective listening is a sign of failing communication. You cannot hope to understand if you have filtered out some of the message and may reinforce or strengthen your bias or partiality for future communications. Active and effective listening. Active listening occurs when the listener attempts to understand as clearly as possible what the speaker says. Effective listening is attempting to understand the perspective of the speaker, empathize, not sympathize with him or her. Active and effective listening are combined and subsumed under listening. Combining both makes good sense for one reason: a person cannot separate from one the other. To be an effective listener, one has to get completely involved in the communication process and be fully present. When it is said fully, means physically, mentally, emotionally and psychologically present. A person may be mentally present but then emotionally disturbed by something else. A student may be physically present in the classroom but mentally absent. Probably the student has to go home for vacation and daydreams about the celebration that will take place at home. Similarly, when the teacher announces that she is going to ask questions to the students by random selection, psychologically a weak student will feel intimidated. So, what are the different types of listeners? Types of listeners. Listeners are 4 types, namely active listeners, passive listeners, non-listeners and evaluative listeners. The characteristics of these types of listeners are as follows: active listeners, passive listeners, non-listeners, marginal listeners, evaluative listeners. Starting with active listeners. As the term implies, active listeners involve themselves actively in the communication process by keenly listening not only to the message but also the way it has been delivered. They focus on the content as well as the manner in which it is delivered. This means that they will take note of the verbal content along with its non-verbal subtext. They will not hesitate to seek clarifications, ask leading question, show their approval by nodding the head, and summarize to clearly indicate that they fully follow the speaker. In this way, the active listeners are quite sensitive towards the feeling of others. They understand the mood of the audience. They show empathy and make the audience or the other person cared for. Once the audience get the feeling that they are being cared for, they will devote themselves fully to the communication process. Once there is mutual involvement, there will be 100% success in the terms of communication. The message will be received correctly and the feedback is given in a favorable manner. So, it leads to a win-win situation and causes effective communication. Contrarily, if the audience would sense that the speaker is insensitive towards their feelings, they would remain cold and distant. Passive listeners. Passive listeners exhibit exactly the opposite behavioristic trait of an active listener. They pay attention only to partial message and lack sensitivity towards the nuances, smaller parts, inner meanings, non-verbal subtext involved in communication. They allow someone to speak without interpreting or seeking clarifications. They do not make notes, nod their head in approvals, maintain eye contact and keep themselves idle. Passive listening is actually hearing and not listening. Since passive listeners keep their mind closed, communication with them is futile, that is unnecessary and incomplete. Non-listeners. The non-listeners do not listen at all because they are genuinely disinterested in the subject. These people pretend to follow the speaker while they are actually preoccupied with something else. So, they will fake attention, but they could easily be recognized by their blank stare, impatience and nervousness mannerism. They might be suffering from rigidity of thinking and egotism. Their complete insensitivity and insensible nature makes them incapable of understanding others. In fact, they do not even make an effort to hear what the other person is saying. You will find non-listeners among authority figures who will do most of the talking and will not let the subjects or subordinates easily express their ideas. Although they frequently interpret by saying, "I understand" and "I know," they actually do not know anything or understand the subject. Marginal listeners. Impatient to listening to the main ideas, marginal listeners pay superficial or artificial attention and are interested only in the bottom line of the topic. They merely hear the sound of words but fail to grasp the message of the meanings. They do not go to the deeper levels in arguments. They use external distractions to excuse themselves from conversations. They will not have the patience to sit through complex technical presentations and jump to the findings and conclusions. It is risky to communicate with marginal listeners because they are not focused on the main idea and often misunderstand their import. Evaluative listeners. Evaluative listeners literally assess the verbal content on the basis of words, not paralinguistic or non-verbal cues or signs. Generally, they use logic to understand the content, hence, they distance themselves emotionally from the subject. As a result, do not show empathy or sensitivity to the speaker. They are mostly prejudiced and judgmental as they presume the meaning before actually the speaker completes the sentence. Moving on to the principles of effective listening. First, stop talking. Don't talk but listen. If we were supposed to talk more than we listen, we would have 2 tongues and 1 ear. When somebody else is talking, listen to what they are saying. Do not interpret. Talk over them or finish their sentences for them. Stop. Just listen. When the other person has finished talking, you may need to clarify to ensure you have received their message accurately. Second, prepare yourself to listen. Relax. Focus on the speaker. Put other things out of the mind. The human mind is easily distracted by others' thoughts. What is for lunch? What time do I need to leave to catch my train? Is it going to rain? Try to put other thoughts out of the mind and concentrate on the message that are being communicated. Third, put the speaker at ease. Help the speaker to feel free to speak. Remember their needs and concern. Nod or use the gestures or words to encourage them to continue. Maintain an eye contact but do not stare. Show your listening and understanding what is being said. Fourth, remove distraction. Focus on what is being said. Don't doodle, shuffle papers, look out of the window, pick your fingernails or similar. Avoid unnecessary interpretations. These behaviors disrupt the listening process and send messages to the speaker that you are bored or distracted. Fifth, empathize. Try to understand the other person's point of view. Look at issues from their perspectives. Let go of the preconceived or pre-believed ideas. By having an open mind, we can more fully empathize with the speaker. If the speaker says something that you disagree with, then wait and construct an argument to counter what is said, but keep an open mind to the views and opinions of others. Sixth, be patient. A pause, even a long pause, does not necessarily mean that the speaker has finished. Be patient and let the speaker continue in their own time. Sometimes it takes time to formulate what to say and how to say. Never interpret or finish a sentence for someone else. Seventh, avoid personal prejudice or biasness. Try to be impartial. Don't become irritated and don't let the person's habit or mannerism distract you from what the speaker is really saying. Everybody has a different way of speaking. Some people are, for example, more nervous than shy than others. Some have regional accents or make excessive arm movement. Some people like to pace while talking. Others like to sit still. Focus on what is being said and try to ignore styles of delivery. 8. Listen to the tone. Volume and tone both add to what someone is saying. A good speaker will use both volume and tone to their advantage to keep an audience attentive. Everybody will use pitch, tone and volume of voice in certain situations. Let these help you to understand the emphasis of what is being said. 9th, listen for ideas, not just words. You need to get the whole picture, not just isolated bits and pieces. Maybe one of the most difficult aspects of listening is the ability to link together pieces of information to reveal the ideas of others. With proper concentration, letting go of the distractions and focus, this becomes easier. 10th, wait and watch for non-verbal communication. Gestures, facial expressions, eye movements can be important. We don't just listen with our ears but also with our eyes. Watch and pick up the additional information being transmitted via non-verbal communication. With listening, there would be some obstructions or barriers. So, what are the barriers to effective listening? Listening is the most important part of communication process. However, listening skills do not come naturally to the most people. They require willingness, practice and patience to develop. There are many things that get in the way of listening and we should be aware of these barriers, many of which are bad habits in order to become an effective listener. There are many reasons individuals fail to listen successfully. These include preconceived idea or bias, interpreting previous experiences, preoccupation, having a closed mind, bringing in emotions, noise, faking attention, becoming emotional, to avoid jumping to conclusion, distractions. Starting with the first barrier, that is preconceived idea or bias. Effective listening include being open-minded to ideas and opinions of others. This does not mean you have to agree, but should listen and attempt to understand. Second, interrupting. Interrupting is a problem for many reasons. First, it is aggressive behavior and will most likely bring a negative response from the speaker being interrupted. Second, it is difficult to listen and speak at the same time. While the listener is interrupting, he or she is certainly not listening fully. Third barrier, previous experiences. We are all influenced by previous experiences in life. We respond to people based on personal appearance, how initial introductions or welcomes are received, and or previous interpersonal encounters. If we stereotype a person, we become less objective and therefore less likely to listen effectively. Fourth, preoccupation. When we have a lot on our minds, we can fail to listen to what is being said as we are too busy concentrating on what we are thinking about. This is particularly true when we feel stressed or worried about issues. 5. Having a closed mind. We all have ideas and values that we believe to be correct, and it can be difficult to listen to the views of others that contradict our own opinion. The key to effective listening and interpersonal skills are more generally is the ability to have a truly open mind, to understand why others think about things differently to you, and use this information to get a better understanding of the speaker. Sixth, bringing in emotions. Emotions arise barriers to effective communication. A listener's senses are not likely to be functioning at their optimum level when he or she is angry. Likewise, it is not possible to understand or appreciate what the speaker is saying if the listener is excessively sad. Seventh, noise. Noise is an unwanted sound. It is a great impediment to clear communication. It is impossible to listen in a noisy environment. It becomes a frustrating experience for both the speaker and the listener. 8. Faking attention, which is often associated with turning out, can be offensive and is usually hard to hide. This is hurtful and sends the message to the speaker that the listener does not really care about what the speaker is saying. If an individual cannot listen actively in the present moment, it is best to let that be known and suggest that the communication process be put off until a point when there are no distractions. 9th, becoming emotional. Becoming emotional can hinder one's ability to listen. It is important that the receiver be aware of his or her emotions. If the sender is sending a message that is offensive, it is important to acknowledge that fact and be aware of that fact that something is threatening a breakdown in the process of communication. When a receiver is angered, it is easy for him or her to miss the most important part of the sender's message. 10th, to avoid jumping to conclusions. It may be helpful for the listener to wait until the speaker is finished before responding. It can also help to ask questions throughout the conversation to clarify issues or to let the speaker know that he or she is communicating in a way that suggests a certain thing, which may not be what they are intending or wishing to say. 11th, distraction. It is easy to become distracted when trying to communicate. Often, one has many tasks to do or there is a lot of activity taking place while someone is trying to communicate. This can be a problem because it leads to miscommunication, faking attention and tuning out all of which threaten the future communication. Now, as a coin has two sides, the barriers will have the ways to overcome the barriers. So, take a look at the ways to overcome barriers in listening. Although the reasons for listening breakdowns are numerous, there are many ways to improve listening skills. These are: first, provide clues that you are actively involved. Clues that one is actively listening can go a long way. It is important to the speaker to feel that the listener cares about what the speaker is saying. This is because it tends to send a message about whether or not the listener cares about the speaker in general. When people do not feel like you care about them, they don't trust you, and the communication process quickly breaks down. Therefore, it is important to use verbal and non-verbal clues that you are listening, including eye contact, gestures, and acknowledging statements. Second, concentration is the key. Concentration requires willingness and practice. Practicing active listening helps with concentration, but there are other elements that contribute to your ability to concentrate on what someone is saying. When you are involved in an exchange of information, you can't be multitasking. It's important to position yourself in a way that maintains eye contact while allowing you to watch for body language and other non-verbal forms of communication. Third, avoid giving an immediate response. It is important to refrain from formulating an immediate response. You won't be able to fully concentrate on forming a genuine understanding of what the speaker is trying to say if you are too busy thinking about what you are going to say in response to them, whenever it is your turn to talk or not. Instead, it is important to approach the communication as a dialogue. Dialogues help us to learn what others have to say by forcing us to think about their message and to acknowledge what we have heard rather than just responding with our own opinions. Fourth, try to prepare beforehand. Preparation can have a huge impact on the outcome of dialogue or any form of communication. To prepare for an interaction where effective listening will be important, it is essential to keep in mind the purpose of exchange. What decisions need to be made and how the collaboration between the sender and the receiver relates are important factors to keep in mind. It is also helpful to approach the situation with the attitude of really caring about and wanting to know the truth. The dialogue should be viewed as an opportunity to uncover the truth and make progress rather than as a challenge or conflict. Fifth, be prepared for reward feedbacks. A willingness to accept revisions will keep the communication process running smoothly. Often, people are so busy trying to defend their position that they fail to really stop and think whether they should be improved upon or reviewed in a different way. This is what is often referred as spending 90 seconds expressing an opinion and 900 seconds blindly defending it. Implementing these techniques takes willingness and patience. The effort is worthwhile. However, as the long-term benefit of improved communication skills will greatly increase one's chances of success in the business world. Effective listening is the most important part of communication process. It is probably the most difficult to master also. There are many barriers to effective listening, but practicing listening techniques will help one overcome these barriers and become a good listener. So, with this, we come to the end of our session on listening skills. To sum up the lecture, today we took an insight on the important element of communication, that is listening. Next, we also studied about the purpose and the types of listening. Further, we tried to understand the barriers to effective listening and also tried to understand the ways to improve the listening skills. Hence, I hope you are through with today's lecture. Thank you.